The Conclave fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at exactly 0400 hours, and I watched every single one of them arrive. 14 warships, 2 carrier platforms, a command vessel the size of small moon. They materialized in clean formation, their drive plumes cutting bright orange lines across the dark of the Kepler shelf, and not one of them knew I was there. My name is Yael Oren. I am a commander in the Earth Coalition Navy, and for 22 days I have been sitting in the dark, 600 meters from where the Conclave's lead escort was now running its navigational checks. I could hear their comms. I could read their cargo manifests. I could count the crew members walking the corridors of their command vessel through passive optical feeds, and they had no idea. That is what I want you to understand before anything else. That moment, that specific feeling of watching a fleet of 14 warships arrive to intimidate a species they believed was helpless, while I sat close enough to touch them and said nothing, is the feeling that defined 12 years of work. 12 years of building something the galaxy had never seen, had never even imagined, because they had decided long ago that we were not capable of imagining it either. The Dawnbreaker was cold and dark and silent, and she was perfect. Her hull was coated in a material that our engineers called the veil. It did not reflect. It did not emit. It swallowed radar pulses and LiDAR sweeps and returned nothing, not even a whisper of distortion. The veil had taken 4 years to develop, and 2 more years to manufacture in enough quantity to coat a ship of Dawnbreaker's size. We built the production facility inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the outer belt, 6 light years from any shipping lane. And we told no one. Not our conclave observers. Not the independent world representatives who attended our annual defense briefings. Not even most of our own admiralty. The people who knew fit in one room. They met in that room once a month, and they never wrote anything down. Around me, my crew of 214 moved in complete silence. That was the other part, the part that no piece of technology could substitute for. The veil could hide our hull from every sensor the Conclave owned. It could not hide a drive plume, an active radar sweep, or a single transmission. So for 22 days, we had run on minimal power, no active systems, no communications. My crew spoke to each other through touch panels, tapping short coded messages onto each other's forearms like a language made of pressure. When someone needed to pass an order, they wrote it on a small screen and held it up. When someone felt afraid, they pressed 2 fingers to the nearest crewmate's shoulder and held them there. We had developed our own vocabulary of stillness over months of training, and inside that vocabulary we were not silent at all. We were the loudest ship in the sector. We were just the only ones who could hear ourselves. I was watching the Conclave's command vessel through our passive optical array when my first officer, Lieutenant Gideon Marsh, appeared at my shoulder and held up his screen. It read, they are deploying a picket line. 3 escort ships repositioning to cover the helium. 3 extraction corridors. I looked at the positions forming on my tactical display and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter than anger and more dangerous. Recognition. This was exactly what our intelligence directorate had predicted down to the deployment pattern. The Conclave was not here to negotiate. They were here to enforce. The helium, 3 fields in the outer belt, were the primary energy source for humanity's deep space infrastructure, and the Conclave had decided, in a closed session we had quietly recorded 6 months earlier, that restricting our access to those fields was the cleanest way to slow our development. They did not want to remove humanity from the interstellar community. That would be impolite. They simply wanted to manage us, to keep us small and grateful and dependent. The plan had a name in Conclave internal documents. They called it the Stewardship Initiative. I had read the full text 3 times. The language was careful and considerate and completely honest about its intentions, which were to ensure that humanity did not grow fast enough to become inconvenient. Gideon held up another screen. They're also jamming the long-range relay buoys. Our nearest communication window to Earth is closed. I nodded. That was expected too. The Conclave would not want us calling home while they repositioned their fleet around our extraction corridor. They wanted to present us with a finished situation. A closed door with a polite note attached. Sorry, this entrance is now managed. Please use the approved access points, which we control, at fees we determine, on a schedule we set. I picked up my own screen and wrote back to Gideon. Let them finish setting up. I want their full deployment on record before we do anything. He read it and gave me a small nod. Gideon had been with me since the program's first year. He was the kind of officer who communicated entire paragraphs with a single expression. Right now, his expression said that he agreed, that he was calm, and that he had been waiting a long time for what was coming. All of that in one nod. I turned back to my display and counted ships again. 14 warships, 2 carrier platforms, 1 command vessel. The command vessel was the Eternal Meridian, flagship of Admiral Vreth of the Conclave's 3rd expansion fleet. Vreth was considered one of the finest strategic minds in the Conclave's military structure. He was methodical, experienced, and deeply contemptuous of humanity, a fact he expressed in internal communications with the kind of casual confidence that comes from never imagining that the subject of your contempt might be listening. I had read his internal reports too. He described humans as an energetic juvenile species, prone to emotional decision-making and incapable of the long, institutional patience required for true interstellar power. He was not entirely wrong. Humans are energetic. We do make emotional decisions sometimes. But Vreth had made the same mistake every Conclave official made when they looked at us. He had seen our noise and assumed it was all we were. He had never looked for what we did in the quiet. My screen buzzed against my palm. A message from the lower deck, from our intelligence officer, Lieutenant Petra Noel. She had been monitoring the Conclave's internal channels continuously for 3 weeks, and she had the particular talent of being able to read tone in alien communications the way a musician hears key changes. The message read, Vreth just told his senior staff they expect no complications. He said, and I am quoting directly, the humans will not even know we were here until the embargo is already in place. I read that line twice. I read it the way you read something you want to remember exactly, word for word, so you can hold it up someday and say, here, this was the moment. I wrote back to Petra, log it, timestamp and all, log everything. Outside the hull of the Dawnbreaker, the Conclave fleet continued its work. Picket ships locked their positions. Scan drones fanned out across the extraction corridors like patient hands closing around something small and fragile. The command vessel, the Eternal Meridian, held the center of the formation, enormous and certain and utterly unaware that it was being watched. 600 meters away, in the dark, I held my breath. And I waited. There is a particular skill that humans are better at than the rest of the galaxy gives us credit for. We are told we are impatient. We are told we are reactive, that we cannot hold a long plan, that our politics and our arguments and our noise make us structurally incapable of the kind of quiet, sustained, decade-long effort that real power requires. What they missed is this. When humans decide something matters, truly decide it, deep in the bones of a generation, we become something that the galaxy had no word for. We become patient in the way that stone is patient. We become quiet in the way that the dark between stars is quiet. Not empty, not inactive. Simply waiting for exactly the right moment and willing to wait as long as that takes. The Conclave had been managing us for 31 years. We had been building our answer for 12. High Command's last message, received before we went dark, was still on my personal screen. I had read it so many times I no longer needed to look at it. It said, hold position, observe, let them commit fully. We want all on record. 6 words of instruction for 12 years of work. 6 words for 214 crew members living in silence on a ship the galaxy did not know existed. 6 words that, when the moment came, would mean everything. Hold position. I held. The Conclave's jamming grid expanded across the sector in careful, overlapping arcs. Each expansion was logged on my tactical display, green lines spreading like a net being drawn slowly closed. They were thorough. Vreth was thorough. He had planned for every complication he could imagine, and the tragedy of his position was simply that his imagination had a ceiling he did not know about. Gideon appeared beside me again. His screen read, full deployment complete. They have sealed the extraction corridor. The jamming grid is active across all standard frequencies. He paused, then added a second line below the first. We are completely enclosed. I looked at those two words. Completely enclosed. From the outside, that was true. From the outside, a conclave fleet had just sealed a sector of space and blocked all communications and locked down an extraction route that humanity depended on. From the outside, we were isolated. I wrote back to Gideon, "Good. Now they cannot leave without going through us." He read it. A slow smile crossed his face, the first smile I had seen from him in 11 days, and he passed the screen to the nearest crew member, who read it and passed it on. In 2 minutes, without a single word being spoken, that message had traveled through most of the bridge. The dark ship was quiet, but the crew of the Dawnbreaker was smiling. On the 11th day of our silent watch, a conclave science vessel arrived at the edge of our position and began running passive sweeps. I want to be honest about that moment because I think it deserves honesty. When Petra flagged the sweep patterns on my display, and I realized that a sophisticated sensor array was now moving in a slow arc that would carry it within 600 meters of our hull, I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in weeks. I felt afraid. Not afraid of discovery in the sense of being caught doing something wrong. We had done nothing wrong. We were in unclaimed space, running legally dark, and every action we had taken since leaving Earth had been logged, time-stamped, and witnessed by multiple crew members. We had committed no violation. If anything, the Conclave's fleet was the one operating outside the terms of the Treaty of Verres, which prohibited unilateral resource embargoes without a coalition vote. No, the fear I felt was simpler and more human than legal calculation. We were 600 meters from a warship. We had 214 people aboard. We had been sitting in silence for 11 days, and the thing I was afraid of, in that quiet and honest part of myself that every commander keeps locked away during operations, was that something I had not thought of would be the thing that ended it. Gideon's screen. The science vessel is the Conclave Survey Ship Cressida. Specialized deep field scanner array. Longest range passive sensor suite in their inventory. Of course it was. Breath was thorough. I wrote to Petra, "What are they looking for?" Her answer came back quickly. Anomalous gravity signatures. Microdistortions in the local spacetime caused by large mass concentrations operating without active systems. She paused, then added, "The veil handles EM. It does not handle gravity." I already knew that. Our engineers had discussed it during development. A ship the size of Dawnbreaker has mass. Mass bends spacetime in tiny, measurable ways. The veil could not make us massless. What it could do was distribute our mass signature across a wider area using a series of resonance buffers along the hull, blurring the precise location of the distortion into a pattern that resembled natural background variation. In testing, it had worked. In testing, the distortion had been indistinguishable from the kind of microvariation you get from ore-rich asteroid fields. We were parked next to an ore-rich asteroid field. That had not been an accident. Still, the Cressida was good. Her array was sweeping in careful, overlapping passes, and as I watched her track on my display, I did the geometry in my head. She was going to pass within approximately 580 meters of our port side. Her sweep pattern would put her active sensors pointed directly at us for approximately 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I wrote to the crew through the ship-wide touch panel relay, one line that went out to every station simultaneously. Nobody breathes loud. It was a joke. No one could hear breathing through the hull. But I felt the small pulse of warmth that ran through the ship as the message was passed, crew members reading it and touching the shoulder of the person next to them, and I knew that the 4 minutes and 30 seconds would hold. The Cressida swept past. She was beautiful in the way that well-built ships are always beautiful regardless of who built them, with clean lines and efficient proportions and sensor arrays that spread from her hull like open hands. She was looking for us. She was looking hard. Her instruments were the best the Conclave Science Division had produced in the last decade. She found an asteroid field and some background variation. For minutes. 31 seconds. Then the Cressida turned north and continued her outer sweep, and I sat with my eyes closed for approximately 3 seconds, and then I opened them and went back to work. Gideon was already at my side. His screen, she is continuing the outer perimeter. Pattern suggests 2 more passes over the next 6 hours, neither of them as close as this one. I wrote back, thank Petra for the heads up. Then I added, how is the crew? He thought for a moment, then wrote, tired, steady, proud, I think, even if they do not know it yet. I read that and nodded. I thought he was right. Pride is a strange thing. Sometimes you do not know you are carrying it until someone names it for you. What we were doing, all of us together in the silence of this ship, was something that had never been done before. Not just tactically, something larger. We were demonstrating, with every quiet hour, that the thing the Conclave believed about us was wrong. That the noise was a choice, not a limit. That behind the energy and the arguments and the visible, chaotic, messy, glorious human exterior, there was something the galaxy had never bothered to look for. Depth, patience, will. The Cressida finished her outer pass and settled into a parking position near the edge of the embargo formation. On the open Conclave command channel, which Petra monitored continuously, Admiral Vreth received her report and was satisfied. Sector is clear, his comms officer logged. No anomalies. No unauthorized signatures. The Kepler shelf is clean. I wrote that sentence in my personal log. I saved it under a folder I had titled, Things They Said When They Thought We Could Not Hear. That folder was very full. Petra brought me the worst of it on day 16. She appeared at my station at 0200 hours during the quietest part of the night cycle, when the bridge was running on reduced crew and the only sound were the soft hum of passive systems and the occasional tap of a touch panel message. She held up her screen without preamble. On it was a transcript of a private communication between Admiral Vreth and the Conclave's Interstellar Affairs Committee, sent 6 days earlier and encrypted on a frequency we had cracked in the 3rd week of our observation. I read it slowly because it deserved to be read slowly. The communication outlined the next phase of what Vreth called the Management Protocol for Sector 7, which was the Conclave's internal designation for human space. The Helium-3 embargo was Phase 1. Phase 2, to be implemented within 18 months of the embargo taking effect, was a formal reclassification of humanity's status within the interstellar framework. The current designation was Developing Independent Species, which carried with it certain rights of self-determination, access to trade routes, and protection from unilateral resource action. The proposed new designation was Protected Transitional Species. The document described this reclassification as a compassionate measure. It used the word compassionate 4 times in 8 paragraphs. A protected transitional species was understood to be in need of guidance, to have demonstrated an inability to manage its own developmental trajectory responsibly, and to benefit from the careful oversight of more established interstellar civilizations. In practical terms, it meant that every major decision affecting human space, from trade agreements to expansion zones to resource access, would require conclave approval. In practical terms, it meant that we would not be citizens of the galaxy. We would be wards of it. I held Petra's screen for a long time. She stood and waited. Petra was not someone who rushed a moment, and she understood, without needing to be told, that this was a moment that required time. The thing that affected me most was not the reclassification itself. It was the tone of the document. It was not hostile. It was not angry. Vreth and his committee genuinely believed they were doing us a kindness. They looked at humanity and saw something promising but unready, a species with fire but no discipline, with ambition but no wisdom. They were going to manage that gap for us. They were going to hold the door of the galaxy half open and tell us to wait here, be patient, and perhaps in a few centuries, if we demonstrated the right qualities, they would let us in properly. They did not ask what qualities we had already demonstrated in private. They did not know to ask. I gave the screen back to Petra and wrote one line. How many of our crew have seen this? She wrote back, only me and my team. 6 people total. I considered that for a moment, then wrote, share it with all department heads tomorrow morning. Gideon first. She nodded and moved to leave. I held up a hand and wrote one more line. Also tell them that in 6 days, none of this will matter anymore. Petra read that line. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I had seen on her face once before on the day she had been told she was selected for the Dawnbreaker program. It was the expression of someone who has been carrying a heavy thing for a long time and has just been told, reliably, that they are close to being able to put it down. She pressed 2 fingers to my shoulder, held them there for a second, and walked back to her station. On the command channel, Admiral Vreth was conducting a routine status review with his fleet captains. Everything nominal, one by one they reported. No contacts, no anomalies. The embargo line is holding. The sector is quiet. 14 warships and a command vessel, sitting in a net they had built around empty space. In the empty space, 214 people were reading a document about how the galaxy had decided to limit them, and they were deciding, each of them individually and all of them together, what they thought about that. My screen buzzed. A message from Chief Engineer Warren Cole, who ran the ship's drive systems and had not sent a non-technical message since day 3. It was 3 words. We are ready. I wrote back, I know. On day 19, Ensign Caldera found me during the afternoon watch. Owen Caldera was 24 years old. He had come to the program from a small coastal town and had a talent for communications analysis that made Petra call him the best ear in the sector. He had been monitoring the Conclave's public broadcast frequencies alongside Petra's team, cataloging the signals the Conclave was sending to its own population about the Kepler Shelf operation. He held up his screen. I read it. It was a summary of the Conclave's public messaging on the embargo. The framing to Conclave citizens was one of responsible stewardship. A developing species in their region was consuming resources at an unsustainable rate. The Conclave was stepping in, as it had done for other developing worlds, to provide structure and guidance. The humans would benefit from this in the long run. Progress sometimes required patience. The Conclave's citizens were being told a story about protecting us. Owen added one line below the summary, in small, careful letters. They actually believe they are the good people in this story. I read that and felt something shift in my chest. Not anger. Something more precise than anger. Clarity. I wrote back to Owen, that is the most important thing to understand about them. Hold on to it. It matters for what comes next. He read it and gave me a small nod, the kind of nod that asks a question without forming one. And I wrote one more line, because when people believe they are good and then are shown clearly that they are wrong, they have a choice. That is the moment when things change. Not before. Owen sat with that for a moment, then pressed 2 fingers to my shoulder and went back to his station. 3 days later, at 0400 hours, the message arrived from High Command. It came on a tight beam laser pulse, invisible to any radio frequency monitoring, bounced through a relay buoy hidden inside the asteroid field. It was 8 characters long, a timestamp and a single word. Now, I read it once. I set the screen face down on my console. I looked at the Conclave fleet on my display. 14 warships and 2 carrier platforms and 1 enormous command vessel, arranged in a careful net around empty space, certain of their position and their plan and their understanding of the situation. I picked up my screen. I opened the ship-wide channel. I wrote the message that every crew member had been waiting 22 days to receive. Begin Uncloaked sequence. All stations active. This is not a drill. The Dawnbreaker came alive. It did not happen all at once. It happened in a sequence that Warren Cole had designed and rehearsed so many times that his engineering team could run it in their sleep. The resonance buffers along the hull powered down first, releasing our distributed mass signature back into a single coherent point. Then, section by section, the veil panels retracted, folding back into the hull in a motion that looked, on the passive cameras of anyone watching, like a ship materializing out of nothing. Out of genuine, sensor-confirmed, instrument-verified nothing. The active systems came online in order of priority. Shields first, rising around us with a hum I felt through the soles of my boots. Then navigation. Then weapons, powered but not armed, present but not threatening. Then communications, opening every frequency simultaneously, our signal filling the sector like a shout in a quiet room. And then the running lights. This was something Warren had added without being asked, a small personal decision that he had included in the sequence and told me about only the night before we went silent. He had programmed the Dawnbreaker's running lights to come on at full power during Uncloaked. Not the standard navigation lighting. Every light on the ship, every panel, every corridor window, every external marker. He had said, "I want them to see us." When the lights came on, the Dawnbreaker did not look like a warship materializing out of nothing. She looked like a city appearing in the dark. She blazed. She was unmistakable. She was enormous. And she was 600 meters from the Eternal Meridian's port side. 600 meters. I know what it looked like from out there, because we captured it. In the weeks that followed, analysts reconstructed the sensor records from multiple Conclave ships, and the images were extraordinary. One moment, empty space. The next, a human warship, fully lit, running all active systems, shields at full strength, weapons clearly visible but not aimed, sitting inside their formation as though she had been there for years. Because she had. Then I opened the communications channel. Not a private channel. Not a diplomatic frequency. The Conclave's own command frequency, the one Admiral Vreth used to speak to his fleet, the one that was simultaneously received by every ship in the formation and automatically routed to the fleet command logs, which fed directly to the Conclave's central communications archive. I spoke in his language. No translator. No lag. Admiral Vreth. We have been here for 22 days. We have recorded everything. This channel is now open to every Conclave member world, every independent system in this sector, and Earth. I paused for exactly one breath. Good morning. The silence on the command frequency lasted 4 seconds. They erupted. I kept my voice calm and let them talk. I listened to 14 warship captains attempting to simultaneously process a tactical situation that had no precedent in their training, their doctrine, or their understanding of what humans were capable of. I heard the word impossible used 3 separate times in the first 10 seconds. I heard a captain ask his sensor officer to check their instruments, because there must be a malfunction. I heard another captain simply go quiet mid-sentence, as though the thing he was about to say had become irrelevant before he finished it. And then I heard Vreth. His voice on the command frequency was controlled. He was not a man who lost control in a crisis. And I gave him credit for that, because what had just happened inside his formation was the kind of thing that tests the deepest foundations of a commander's composure. He cleared the frequency with a single sharp tone, and then he spoke. He did not shout. He did not issue orders for fire or evasion or any kind of hostile action. He opened a private channel to the Dawnbreaker, and in a voice that was quiet and precise and carried, underneath its control, a quality I can only describe as honest uncertainty, he said one thing. "How long have you been able to do this?" I let the silence run for 10 seconds. I counted them. I had planned those 10 seconds since before we left Earth. Not to be dramatic, not to make a point about power, but because the question he was asking was larger than the Kepler shelf. It was larger than the embargo. It was larger than any single tactical situation. He was asking how much he did not know. He was asking what else was sitting in the dark, watching, waiting for its moment. He deserved a moment to sit inside that question. We all did. Then I said, "Long enough." The tactical picture on my display showed the Conclave fleet holding position. No ships had moved toward us. No weapons had been activated. Vreth was a careful man, and careful men do not react to something they do not understand by attacking it. He was thinking. He was calculating. That was correct. That was exactly what I had expected and exactly what we had prepared for. We were not here to fight. We had never been here to fight. The Dawnbreaker's weapons were online because it would have been strange and perhaps confusing not to have them online, but they were pointed at nothing and armed against nothing. Meanwhile, the broadcast had gone out. Petra confirmed it from her station with a single raised hand and 2 fingers extended, our prearranged signal for mission objective confirmed. The recordings, 22 days of them, all the intercepts and the transcripts and the tactical logs and the sensor data and the internal Conclave communications, including Admiral Vreth's detailed notes on the stewardship initiative and the protected transitional species reclassification, and every casual, confident careful expression of contempt for our species that the Conclave fleet had transmitted while they believed no one was listening were going out simultaneously on 47 different frequencies to every Conclave member world, every independent system within 600 light-years, and every relay station on the Earth Coalition network. The Conclave had come to the Kepler shelf to deliver a message. We were delivering one too. Gideon appeared at my shoulder. His screen read, Vreth's fleet captains are requesting engagement clearance from him. 4 of them so far. I wrote back. What is he telling them? A pause while Gideon checked Petra's feed. Then, he is telling them to hold. He is saying, and this is verbatim from Petra, that he needs to understand the tactical situation before any response is authorized. I nodded. That was the right call. I respected it. Vreth was wrong about many things, but he was not reckless. On the main tactical display, I watched the Conclave formation hold. 14 warships, fully armed, fully crewed, capable of generating enormous firepower, sitting in place because their admiral was thinking rather than reacting. That pause, the specific pause between the moment Vreth understood what had happened and the moment he decided what to do about it, was the pause I had been looking forward to since the day I was given command of this ship. That pause was the moment the galaxy changed its mind about us. And we had not fired a single shot. Owen Caldera was at my side within 30 seconds of the broadcast going out. He did not bring a screen. He just stood next to me and looked at the tactical display, at the Conclave fleet holding position around a human ship that had appeared out of nothing. And his expression was the expression of someone seeing a thing become real that they had only ever believed in theory. I let him stand there for a moment. Then I wrote on my screen and held it up for him. You asked me 11 days ago how long we had to keep watching them insult us. He nodded. I wrote, now you know. He looked at the display for another long moment. Then he pressed 2 fingers to my shoulder and held them there a beat longer than usual and went back to his station. On the command frequency, the sector was quiet. The Conclave fleet was holding. The Dawnbreaker was blazing in the dark, a ship that should not have existed, doing something that should not have been possible 600 meters from the finest fleet the Conclave's 3rd expansion could assemble. And somewhere in the spread of the galaxy, 47 signals were moving outward at the speed of light, carrying 22 days of truth in every direction. Warren Cole sent me a message from engineering. 3 words, the same 3 words he had sent on day 19. We are ready. I wrote back. We are more than that. The Cressida turned around before anyone else did. I noticed it on my tactical display at 0432 hours, 28 minutes after the Dawnbreaker uncloaked. The Conclave science vessel that had swept our position 11 days earlier, the one with the best passive sensor array in their inventory, rotated slowly out of her parking position and began moving toward us, not on an intercept course, not aggressively, but in the slow, deliberate way of a ship repositioning to get a better look. She was not coming to fight us. She was coming to confirm that we were real. I understood that impulse. What the Cressida's crew had recorded on their instruments when we uncloaked, a mass signature appearing instantaneously from nothing in a position their own sensors had swept as clean 11 days earlier, was data that would require considerable review before anyone in the Conclave Science Division would accept it without direct visual confirmation. They needed to see us with their own eyes. They needed to know that their instruments were working and that the universe was still the universe, and that what had happened was a thing that had actually happened. I opened a channel directly to the Cressida and said, gently, in the most careful and precise version of their language I could manage, "You are welcome to approach. We will not interfere with your observation. Take as long as you need." There was a long pause. Then their captain, a female voice with the particular careful enunciation of someone speaking a practiced second language, said, "We are approaching for visual confirmation only. We carry no weapons and intend no hostile action." I said, "We know. Come ahead." The Cressida moved to within 200 meters of our port side. Through our optical feeds, I could see crew members gathering at the science vessel's observation windows, pressing close to the transparent panels to look at us. I turned on the lights in the corridors nearest those windows. I thought they should be able to see that there were people in here. Actual people, human people, going about their work, moving through their ship, existing in the specific and ordinary way that makes it impossible to pretend that a species is simply a problem to be managed. Gideon's screen, Vreth has been on a closed channel for the last 19 minutes. He is talking to someone we cannot identify. The encryption signature is different from his fleet command codes. He is talking to someone outside his normal command structure. I wrote back, "The committee? Gideon, possibly." The signal is being routed through 3 relay jumps before it reaches him. Whoever it is, they are being careful. I thought about that. Vreth was talking to someone careful on encrypted channels in the middle of a crisis he had not anticipated. That was useful information. It meant that the Conclave's response to this moment was not going to come from Vreth alone. There were people above him who were now involved, and people above him meant the situation had already grown larger than a fleet action. It had become a political event, and political events have different rules. Political events can be changed by evidence. Petra sent me a summary at 0455 hours. The broadcast had reached 16 independent systems, and she was already tracking response signals. Most of them were not directed at us. They were directed at the Conclave, and they were asking questions. Hard ones. The transcript of Vreth's communication planning the protected transitional species reclassification was the piece generating the most response traffic. It was being quoted, forwarded, analyzed, translated into 17 additional languages by independent media networks, and discussed on the open channels of at least 4 species who had their own complicated history with Conclave management. One response stood out. It came from a small system called Veth Prime, inhabited by a species the Conclave designated as a Category 2 developing culture, which meant they had interstellar travel but no coalition membership, a situation not entirely different from humanity's position 6 years ago. The message was brief and had been sent on an open frequency. It said, "We see you. We are listening." I saved that message in the same folder where I kept Vreth's words about humans being an energetic juvenile species. I saved it right below his because I wanted them to be next to each other. I wanted to be able to look at both of them in the same glance and understand the full picture of what was happening in this sector. Vreth came back on the command frequency at 0511 hours. He had clearly made decisions. His voice was steady and measured and carried a quality that I recognized, having spent 3 weeks studying his communication patterns, as the tone he used when he was presenting a considered position rather than a reactive one. He had not spent those 19 minutes in panic. He had spent them thinking, and the thinking had produced something coherent. He said, "Commander Oren, I would like to discuss the current situation through a direct channel. What you have done here constitutes a significant development, and I believe we both have an interest in handling it in a responsible manner. I have been waiting for those words, or words like them, since we went dark. Not because I knew exactly what he would say, but because I knew that Vreth was the kind of commander who eventually wants to understand a thing rather than simply react to it. That quality was one of the reasons he was dangerous. It was also one of the reasons that what happened next was possible. I said, "Open the channel, Admiral. We are happy to talk." The next 4 hours were the most interesting of my career. Vreth was good. I want to be clear about that, because what follows is not the story of a foolish man being outmaneuvered. What Vreth did in those 4 hours was attempt to construct a framework in which the current situation could be resolved without the Conclave losing face on a scale that would destabilize their internal politics. He was thinking about his coalition partners. He was thinking about the independent worlds who were now reading 22 days of his private communications. He was thinking about the committee he had been talking to on encrypted channels, and what they were going to want and what was achievable. He was also, and this came through clearly in the specific places where his voice tightened slightly, beginning to understand the full scope of what had happened. Not just the tactical surprise, the deeper thing, the thing that the presence of the Dawnbreaker, sitting whole and real and blazing in the middle of his formation, actually meant. He asked me, at some point in the second hour, how many ships like this we had. I said, "That information is not part of this discussion." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I see." Those 2 words told me that he understood. He did not know the number. He was not going to know the number. and the not knowing, for a methodical man who had planned every variable of this operation, was itself the answer. Because if the answer were comfortable, I would have given it to him. At 0843 hours, 3 full hours before the diplomatic vessel Meridian, carrying Earth's senior negotiating team, was scheduled to arrive in system, Vreth said something that I had not expected. He had been speaking carefully and professionally for hours, navigating a conversation that had no precedent in his training or mine. And then he paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had a quality underneath the professionalism that I can only describe as genuine. He said, "Commander, off the record, if such a thing is possible at this point, how long were you actually out here?" I said, "This channel is being recorded on both ends, and I would not want you to rely on anything being off the record. But the answer is not classified. 22 days at this position. The program itself has been running for 12 years. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 12 years. He said it the way you say something when you are revising an entire picture in your mind. Not as a question, not with anger, simply as an acknowledgement of new information settling into place. I said, yes. He said, and the information you collected here, the broadcasts and the communications and the tactical records, I said, are already distributed, have been for several hours. He said, yes. I see. We talked for another hour. The content of that hour I will not reproduce here. Some of it belongs to the negotiations that were already beginning at the edge of our system. But I will say this. At one point, Vreth asked me why, with the capability we had demonstrated, with the tactical position we had held, and the evidence we had gathered, we had not simply acted. Why we had waited. Why, in 12 years of building something the galaxy did not know about, we had not used it to simply change our circumstances by force. I thought about that question for a moment, not because I did not have an answer, because I wanted to give him the correct one. I said, because that was not what the ships were built for. He said, then what were they built for? I said, to be here, exactly here, in a moment like this one, where you have to make a decision about what we are, and you have to make it knowing that we were present the whole time you thought we were not. Another silence, longer than the others. Then Vreth said something I did not expect and will not forget. He said, that is a more sophisticated answer than I expected. I said, I know. He said nothing for a moment. Then, I think I have been making assumptions. I said, yes. He said, I will need time to consider how to address that. I said, we have time. Take what you need. At 1,100 hours, the Meridian arrived, and Admiral Vreth of the Conclave's 3rd Expansion Fleet did something that his fleet captains, monitoring on the command channel, received in complete silence. He issued the order for his picket line to stand down and withdraw from the extraction corridor. No conditions, no negotiating position, simply a withdrawal, making space for the Meridian to approach, and with it the implicit acknowledgement that the conversation that was about to happen was a different kind of conversation than the one he had planned when he arrived in this sector. Owen Caldera sent me a message from his station. It said, they're using the word partners in their communication logs. The Conclave channel just logged an internal message from Vreth to his fleet. He used the word partners. I read that word on Owen's screen and felt the weight of 12 years settle very gently into something that was not yet celebration, but was close to it. Something quieter and more durable than celebration. I pressed 2 fingers to Owen's shoulder, and he pressed 2 fingers to mine, and neither of us moved for a moment. Outside the hull, the Conclave fleet was reconfiguring. The jamming grid was coming down. The extraction corridor was opening. The net they had drawn so carefully around empty space was being dismantled by the hands that had built it, and in the middle of the sector that they had sealed and controlled and believed was theirs to manage, the Dawnbreaker blazed. She blazed. The commission room on Orbital Platform 7 had the particular quality of spaces where important things happen regularly. Clean surfaces, good light. The kind of silence between words that is maintained by the weight of what is being said rather than by any rule of decorum. I had been sitting at this table for 4 hours, and I was aware, in the way you become aware of things that you have been carrying a long time, that I was almost done. The commission was a joint body. That was new in the history of the treaty structure, genuinely new in a way that mattered. 3 human representatives from the Earth Coalition's Senior Council. 3 conclave commissioners appointed by the full coalition membership, which itself was a point worth noting, because the appointment process had required a vote, and the vote had been close, and the fact that it had happened at all was a consequence of 22 days in the dark and everything that followed. The chair was a conclave commissioner named Dale Foss. She had not been part of Retha's command structure. She had been appointed specifically because she had no prior direct involvement with the Kepler Shelf operation, a choice that told me something about how seriously the coalition was treating this. They had chosen someone clean, someone who would not be carrying the specific discomforts of what had been said on those open channels. Foss had been asking good questions all morning. Not comfortable questions, good ones, the kind that are designed to extract a real picture rather than a preferred one. She said, "Commander Oren, I would like to return to something you said earlier about the purpose of the cloaking program. You described the ships as libraries that could defend themselves. Could you explain what you meant by that?" I said, "The Dawnbreaker's primary mission systems are observation and recording. Her sensor array is larger and more sophisticated than her weapons array. The design priority was to be able to see everything, record everything, and preserve that record. The weapons systems were added in the second year of development, after a threat assessment suggested that an undetected ship in a sensitive area would occasionally need to be able to protect itself." She said, "The weapons were secondary." I said, "They were protective. Everything we did at the Kepler Shelf was protective. We did not threaten anyone. We did not aim at anyone. We simply made our presence known at a moment when the evidence we had gathered was sufficient to support a clear factual account of what had happened in that sector." Another commissioner, a human named Elliot Ward, who I had met twice before in other contexts, leaned forward slightly. He said, "Commander, I want to ask a question that some people on both sides of this commission are going to find uncomfortable." I said, "Most of the interesting questions are uncomfortable." He said, "You had every tactical advantage. For 22 days, you were inside the Conclave's formation without detection. When you uncloaked, you had weapons online and a complete intelligence picture of their deployment. Why did you not use that advantage more aggressively?" I had expected this question. It had been coming in various forms all morning, rephrased and reoriented, looking for the same thing. I had been honest in each answer, and I was honest in this one. I said, because our objective was never to defeat the Conclave fleet. It was to create a moment in which a truthful conversation became possible. An attack, even a successful one, would have made that conversation impossible. It would have confirmed every assumption they had made about us. It would have given them a story in which they were the victims, and that story would have been more durable than the truth. Foss said, "And you believe the truth was the better instrument." I said, "I believe it was the only one worth using." She wrote something down. The room was quiet for a moment. Then a third commissioner, another conclave member named Arel Sorn, who had been quiet for most of the morning, spoke. He said, "Commander, I represent a block of coalition members who have considerable concerns about the precedent set by the concealment of a weapons program of this scale. The Dawnbreaker and her sister ships represent a significant undisclosed military capability. Our members are asking why this was not disclosed." I said, "That is a fair concern. The short answer is that we did not disclose it because we're not certain it would remain a secret if disclosed, and a cloaking technology that is known to exist is significantly less effective than one that is not. The longer answer is that the program was built in response to a threat environment that was itself not being disclosed to us. We were not informed that the protected transitional species reclassification was being planned. We were not consulted about the stewardship initiative. We were not made partners in the decisions that were being made about our future. We made the decision to build something in the dark because we were being kept in the dark about the things that most affected us." Sorn said, "You are saying our lack of transparency created yours." I said, "I am saying that partnerships require honest communication in both directions. When one party is making plans that fundamentally affect the other party without telling them, the other party has to make decisions with whatever information they have." That was the situation we were in. There was a longer silence after that, not a comfortable one. The kind of silence that happens when a true thing has been said that everyone in the room knows is true, but not all of them are ready to say out loud. Elliot Ward broke it. He said, "What do you believe is required now, Commander? From both sides?" I said, "What is required is the same thing that was required before any of this happened, and will be required long after this commission ends. Real transparency. Actual partnership. Not managed development. Not stewardship. Not a ceiling with a polite sign on it. If the conclave believes that humanity is genuinely part of the interstellar community, that belief needs to be expressed in structures and decisions and access, not just in language. And if humanity is asking for that, we have to hold ourselves to the same standard. What we built was necessary given what we knew. What we build next should not have to be secret." Foss looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you, Commander. I think we have what we need from this session." I stood. The commission members stood. There was a brief exchange of formal acknowledgments, and then the session was suspended for the day, and I walked out of the commission room into a corridor that led to an observation deck overlooking the construction work on the joint platform. I stood at the window for a while. Below, through the transparent hull panels, I could see teams working in environmental suits on the framework of what would eventually be a shared operations center, a space where conclave and human technical staff would work in the same room, on the same systems. It was early in construction, more framework than structure, but it was there. Warren Cole found me at the window. He had been called to testify before a separate technical review committee about the Veil's engineering, a process he had described to me as interesting, in the tone of a person for whom interesting covers a wide range of experiences. He stood next to me and looked out at the construction for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "Petra says the Veth Prime message is getting significant replay across independent networks." I said, "I know. She sent me the analysis this morning." He said, "Do you think they will want the technology?" "The Veth." I said, "Owen says they have already asked at the summit level." "Informally, but yes." Warren was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What did you tell him to say?" I said, "I told him to tell them to ask again." "Formally." Warren thought about that. Then he said, "That is either very generous or very careful." I said, "It is both, I think." He looked at the construction below us for another moment. Then he said, 12 years is a long time to build something in secret." I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you think we will have to do it again?" I thought about that honestly, the way I tried to think about all the questions that deserved honesty. I said, "I hope not. I think the answer depends on whether what happened at the Kepler shelf changes the conversation or just interrupts it. The commission is a good sign. The construction down, there's a good sign. But signs are not structures. They have to become structures before they mean anything permanent." Warren nodded. He was an engineer. He understood the difference between a framework and a finished thing. He said, "Gideon told me about what you said to Owen on day 19, about how things change when people who believe they're good discover they were wrong." I said, "What about it?" He said, "I've been thinking about it, and I think you were right, but I think there is a second part you did not say." I said, "What is that?" He said, "They also have to choose to change. Knowing they were wrong is not enough. They have to decide what to do with that." I looked at him. Warren Cole was a quiet man who did not say many things, but when he said them, they were worth keeping. I said, "Yes, that is the second part." Below us, the joint platform construction continued. Suits moving along framework, tools turning in hands, two species building a thing together in a sector where, 3 months ago, one of them had tried to quietly close a door on the other. Petra sent me a message at 1,600 hours. I read it at the window. It was a brief summary of the day's summit proceedings, which were moving faster than the formal negotiating timeline had anticipated. The conclave's position on the protected transitional species reclassification had been formally withdrawn from all committee agendas. The stewardship initiative had been suspended pending review. The Helium-3 extraction corridor had been reopened under temporary joint oversight, with a permanent framework to be negotiated over the next 6 months. At the end of the summary, Petra had added one personal line. Vreth gave a statement to the conclave's Internal Affairs Committee today. She included a short paraphrase. He stated that the coalition had operated under assumptions that the events at Kepler had shown to be incorrect, and that any future policy toward developing species would need to be constructed from a more thorough and more honest understanding of what those species were capable of. He did not say he was wrong. Politicians rarely say exactly that. But he described an assumption as incorrect, and an assumption that guides policy is the mechanism by which policy is made. Change the assumption, and you change everything that follows from it. I saved that paraphrase in my personal log. I filed it next to Vretha's original communication about humans being an energetic juvenile species incapable of long institutional patience. I wanted them to be in the same folder. I wanted to be able to open that folder someday, years from now, and look at both of them in the same glance and hold the entire arc of it in one moment. Owen Caldera sent a message at 1,700 hours. His promotion had come through 2 weeks after the Kepler shelf incident, the fastest board review in the fleet's recent history, and he was adjusting to the responsibilities of his new rank with the same careful attention he applied to everything else. He wrote, "The VETH have submitted a formal request to the summit level. They are asking whether the Dawnbreaker's concealment technology is something humanity would consider sharing in exchange for a framework of mutual defense cooperation." I read that twice. Then I wrote back, "What did you tell them?" He wrote, "I told them the question was above my level and that I would pass it up the chain." I wrote, "Good. Pass it up." He wrote back, a beat later, "What do you think the answer will be?" I thought about that for a moment. I thought about the VETH Prime message, "We see you, we are listening," and about what it means when a species that has been told to wait to be managed to accept a ceiling looks at another species and suddenly sees a door. I wrote, "I think the answer will depend on what kind of galaxy we want to build next." He sent back, "And what kind do you want?" I said, "The kind where that question has more than one answer, and all of them are allowed." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That is a good answer." I wrote, "I'll learn to be careful with questions that matter." At 1,800 hours, I left the observation deck and walked back toward the transit hub that would take me to the Dawnbreaker. The commission would resume in the morning. The negotiations would continue for months. The joint platform below would take years to finish. There was enormous work ahead, the slow, careful, unglamorous work of turning a single extraordinary moment into a permanent change in how things were done. I had spent 12 years in the dark, building toward one moment. Now the moment was over, and the real work was beginning. I passed a window on the way out. Through it I could see the Dawnbreaker in her berth, docked at the platform's military arm, lit up with her full running lights. She was not hidden. She was not silent. She blazed the way Warren had programmed her to blaze, visible and unmistakable and entirely present. I stopped for a moment and looked at her. My screen buzzed. "A final message from Owen, sir. Someone at the summit just used the word equals. I do not know what comes next, but I think it is something." I read that message standing at the window with the Dawnbreaker blazing in the dark outside, and I thought about the 12 years and the silence and the 22 days and the 4 minutes and 31 seconds and the 10-second pause and every moment between them. And I thought about what it meant to build a thing that the galaxy did not know was there. I wrote back to Owen 3 words. "Keep listening. Always." Then I put the screen in my pocket and kept walking. I will tell you what I said the next morning at the final session of the commission, because it is the thing I most want you to understand about all of it. Commissioner Foss asked me if there was anything I wanted to add to the record before the session concluded. Anything not yet said? I said yes. One thing. I said, they called our sector a graveyard. They were not entirely wrong. For 12 years, something was buried there, quiet and patient and waiting. I said, the mistake